Okay, I got the after lunch time slot, always my favorite, so we're good to go. Good napping time, yes, sir. Okay, everyone can hear me okay? We're good? So I'm going to speak for 15 minutes before I introduce Gene Myers, and I want to tee up Gene's work, and I'm going to do it by talking about how when we have to get to zero, be sustainable, really leadership is everything. And you know, there's going to be a number of themes that you keep hearing a lot of us repeat over a day like this, and I know you'll notice that. So if the remote works, great. So my only comment about this slide is all the expressions you've been hearing are true. Good planets are hard to come by. There is no planet B. You know, this is where we are. We're not going to take the 8 billion people that we heard that we're just about to reach on this planet and move them to Mars. This is the place we have to make work. And what's really scary about where we are right now is this chart works for almost any environmental factor you'd want to map up. There'd be some contours and shapes that might add some detail, but essentially that is where we live today on this planet. And what's really scary is the magnitude of the environmental factor metrics and how they're going up and up to levels we've never seen before, uncharted space. And second is the velocity. The speed in which we're accelerating is also uncharted territory. We've never seen the rate of change on this planet for environmental factors. And these various studies tell us that these planetary boundary limits beyond which, if you exceed, the point of return is increasingly difficult or impossible. We have more and more environmental factors that are getting past it. CO2 now is over 400 parts per million, never been there. Biodiversity is decreasing at rates we've never seen. We're losing species almost by the million. Deforestation, our kind of filter for taking carbon out of the atmosphere, is going at unprecedented rates. Biogeochemical flows, a lot of fertilizers and chemicals from there are just destroying all sorts of river systems, and those are already past the planetary boundary conditions. And let's get this to work. And then there's a whole host of other environmental factors that are right at that juncture where they're hitting the planetary boundaries. Atmospheric aerosol, ocean acidification, freshwater use, novel entities of various chemicals that we're putting out there. So essentially, the dead zones in the oceans are at areas we've never seen before. Fresh water is virtually, again, becoming almost an issue that's putting conflict in play. The amount of plastic in those systems and our fish that we eat today, all these things are basically at near crisis mode, if not already past the crisis mode. So here's a beautiful piece of landscape. It evolved over millions and millions of years, and it was lush and beautiful. And then we came along, and in development, in a blip of time, it became this. And this is New York City, obviously, for those that don't recognize it. What it tells you how fast we convert the land to this use is that any solution for the planet and these environmental factors has to involve buildings. There's no other path. And what really makes it urgent is that time's running out. Over the next 35 years, we will be constructing another New York City, all 5 boroughs, every 35 days. That's about 2 trillion square feet every 35 days. It's not like we can do incremental solutions. It's time we have to have transaction-based solutions, complete transformative strategies. There is no more time left. And so any solution must involve buildings too when you look at the profile that buildings impose on the landscape. So they're about 40% of the total energy use. They consume about 75% of electricity. Over 80% of electricity in this country comes from fossil fuels still. So buildings are the only pathway to managing our carbon. On top of that, any solution has to involve the U.S. We're 4% of the global population, but we account for over 16% of the global emissions of carbon. It has to have a strong central base here in this country. And that moves us to a strategy where we have to look at zero net carbon or zero net energy. And my argument is it has to be inclusive. All buildings have to be achievable for whatever target we set. So that's one of the reasons why I promote Zero Ready in my main job with the DOE. There are a number of reasons I'd like to do that. First of all, you only get about 50 cents on the dollar for solar on a rooftop versus central utility scale solar or distributed generation solar, microgrid solar. So I'm not a big advocate for mandating that solar has to be on site if you only get 50 cents on the dollar. And that doesn't count all the other complications that happen when you put all that rooftop solar into the grid, make it more difficult to manage and manage with all the cloud cover that comes in or goes away. So Zero Ready is, I think, a solution that's inclusive. And in addition, in cities where you don't have good access to sun for lots of buildings, they can play. In climates that don't have good solar resources, they can play. In sites where you have a lot of shading, those buildings can play. This is totally an inclusive strategy for, I think, how we can do zero. So how do we do that? How do we do this inclusive strategy? The first step is you got to optimize energy efficient performance. You got to get it down to the most cost-effective, most efficient level. And so that's about 10 or 20% above the latest codes. Once you've done efficient, then you have to optimize performance. The thing that people don't really talk about that much is how when you make efficient buildings, a lot of risk comes along for the ride. You know, the moisture control becomes much, much more critical because there's no grace period left when the buildings are super, super insulated and airtight. The comfort control solutions are much more difficult, and the indoor air quality becomes much more critical when buildings are airtight. We have to optimize performance. It comes along for the ride. And then you want to be solar ready. So if you don't do the zero now, the building is ready to go in case the owners want to do it in the future. And that gives you basically the framework for the Zero Energy Ready Home program. That's basically what we put out there. Very practical approach. And we know where we're going in the future. We know that we have no choice, but buildings have to be resilient if they're going to be persistent. So that's that program where it's going. And that brings me to the fact that a zero movement's beginning, whether with that program or other programs. We see it now by just the count by Team Zero's an organization that measures zero activity in the marketplace. There are over 22,000 zero energy or zero energy ready certified homes in the US and Canada. The Zero Energy Ready Home program has over 4,000 homes certified. We have hundreds and hundreds of builders that are building to this level and commercial constructions coming along as well. We have cities that are doing all sorts of programs like you heard from Santa Fe, San Luis Obispo, and Austin, Texas that were recognized here. There are many other cities that are implementing zero energy codes. On top of that, the states across the country are also looking to zero energy codes and programs. We all know about California. Oregon has a 2023 code pegged to the Zero Energy Ready Home program. You have other states that are doing stretch codes that look and feel very much like zero programs as well. And then nations, whole nations, particularly around Europe and Asia, are looking to zero energy ready programs and codes as well. So the movement's already in play. And the key thing I wanted to end on is that it's not like this, this environmental reality we're in where this exponential curve is something that we have to just feel like nothing can be done. Strat ozone was in that same situation, and then through leadership and through making global commitments to address the challenge, strat ozone began to drop down and again get under control. And we can make a difference when we're facing these crises. So there's a precedence for that. We have the ability to address these planetary challenges. So leadership's everything. And essentially, this is a strategy that I've been working with. There are a plethora of other programs out there that do a wonderful job in this space. I'll mention the group that I'll be working with a little bit the rest of this year once I leave DOE is called Team Zero, and they're going to be a portal for all the programs besides this one. But right now, what I want to talk about is, when I say leadership is everything, I have the opportunity right now to introduce Gene Meyer, who is probably one of the most special zero energy builders I know, that I have the pleasure now also to call a friend. Essentially, what Gene is doing is he's had about 27 years of building in this space. He's been widely recognized among a whole set of programs, including ours. I think he's the most recognized zero energy builder for Zero Ready Home in the country, with more grand awards than anyone I think that we've given the awards to. He's been recognized in Indera Plus program, and he's also, I have a list of awards he's won. Let me just pull out my, I know he won the Builder of the Year in 2017. On top of that, he was given the National Housing Quality Awards in 2018 and 2019. He's just been recognized tremendously. More importantly, the rest of the industry is watching him. People from globally from other countries like Japan and elsewhere are coming in and looking what he's doing. He's asked to speak all over at conferences like this in the country. Even though he's based in Denver, he's a regional builder. He thinks he's a small builder, but he's much more. He's just all over speaking. And maybe the coup of everything he does is just how generous he is. I know I went to one event where he brings all his trades together, and how effectively he leverages contributions for a local program that lets inner city kids who don't have any resources go to very special schools and get a really great education. On top of that, he's raised over $100,000 for homes for physically disabled families through HomeAid and Challenge Foundation. You know, you can go on and on about what Gene has done. He's just the most amazing builder, the most amazing manager of a company. He's completely transparent and open with how he manages his business with his employees. He's building a basis for a zero energy company to be incredibly successful and persistent. He's just someone you should listen to. Here's Gene Myers.